Hello, Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce members. This is Drew Kamp, President and CEO of the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce for our February 18th weekly legislative update video. I wanted to start by saying that today concludes a rather important first deadline within the legislative calendar for the 2022 session, and that's the first funnel week. And all that means is that bills have to move out of their respective committees in the Senate or the House outside of appropriations and ways and means and leadership bills. Otherwise, they're dead for the rest of the session. Granted, they can get reintroduced in some of those bills, but that's kind of a rarity. They try not to do that too much, just to try to respect the legislative process. But it's an important first deadline to really kind of winnow things down and allow them to focus on some key priority pieces of legislation. Those would include things like tax, workforce, tort reform, unemployment, things along those lines, port authorities, some social bills that they're looking at, and really just some of the priorities, both obviously within the majority caucuses in the House and Senate, and also the governor's office. The top one really being taxes. This week, we saw the House pass their tax proposal, which really eliminates the retirement income tax, which is a big deal, obviously, as we look to attract and retain retirees. And also just in general as a different piece to attract folks to the state of Iowa for future growth and development into their retirement age. But then also it brings about a flat tax of 4%, which we feel and others that are proponents of it feel would increase competitiveness and allow us to compete better with not only our neighboring states, but nationwide, as we rank pretty low right now in the competitiveness of our tax structure. So that 4% decreases down on the personal income side. It doesn't do anything on the corporate income tax reform side, which can be a good thing because obviously then it doesn't impact our tax credits. But we also, as a business organization, do want to see corporate income tax reform addressed as well. So that is one thing that the Senate bill does. And now the ball is in the Senate's court to determine if they're going to amend the House bill they passed over or pass their bill to kind of move things forward and then see what they can do to come to consensus on what the final piece looks like for mutual agreement to send to the governor. But the Senate bill has a lot more pieces. It has not only a flat tax at 3.6%, it has that retirement income phase out as well, income tax phase out as well. It also has pieces for IWIL and some implications with sales tax and local option sales tax that I've talked a lot about in the past. And it also does include corporate and then some changes in ratcheting down on refundability specifically within some of the different tax credit programs that Iowa Economic Development Authority has to offer, largely the research activities tax credit, some in the high quality jobs, some in Endow Iowa, and some other charitable giving and land, conservation tax credits as well. So that's something we're watching closely. Senator Dawson obviously is running the Senate bill. So that's something we have a great resource in our backyard to really make sure we're having those conversations to really winnow down and figure out what that final bill needs to look like with tax as far as tax goes, because that's something that's really important as a priority of ours, and it has been for us at chambers and other business advocacy organizations for a long time to get our income tax system into more in line, into a more competitive, stable, and simplified manner. I did want to also point to the fact that the House did release their budget targets this week as well. I won't go over all of those, but the significance of that is that it sets the top line number for their total budget at about $8.2 billion, I believe. And then it also, within the 7 different pots of money that figure out this, that make up, the state budget, it sets numbers for that on the top end. And then they can then go in as the Senate, as the appropriations subcommittees for those respective line items and go in and figure out how that needs to be funded and to what manner and extent possible. Right now, we're really focusing on the tax pieces on corporate inclusion, making sure that's included. The retirement phase out is something that makes us competitive, like especially as a border state. Nebraska does not offer that. So it allows us to be competitive in that piece. The tax credit edits and implications as a result of adding corporate into it as well. But then also, as we look at any changes to the research activities credit, making sure that they mirror as close as possible the federal research and development tax credit, because it just makes it easier for our companies and others utilizing that to streamline their taxing and their financial processes. So that's an important piece. The workforce piece, workforce bill, that's a big one. It's difficult too, insofar as they've now put together unemployment changes and tort reforms for trucker tort reform and med-mal. Both of those med-mal and trucker tort are, very important to us, being that we have a lot of transportation logistics in a border community. That med-mal piece is super important to our health providers and attracting and retaining the best talent possible and having that care done here versus across the river. So that's something we're watching very closely. We are supportive largely because of the trucker tort reform and the med-mal piece tied into it. But we'll be interested to see if they all stay together or they get pulled out separately. And if they do, we'll obviously advocate them on their behalf on an individual basis. There is a piece about building codes from making it rule-based into standards-based. It's really to address communities with stricter standards. So think some of your region communities that have a lot of rentals. We also obviously have a lot of rentals here in Council Bluffs as well. So those are things that are obviously have some implications that we continue to monitor and have conversations about as well. Port authorities, we were able to get that bill actually put through the funnel. It was not funnel proof. It's now in Ways and Means, so it is funnel proof, but it had to pass the Senate Commerce Committee. And we were thankful that Senator Dawson and Senator Schultz helped us out to make sure that it would get passed, because it could have huge implications as we talk about some multi-jurisdictional developments between Omaha and Council Bluffs and the hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's something that was really important to get that bill across. We're working with folks across the river at the Omaha Chamber to really make sure that any changes that we're making can be mirrored in the manner that is necessary for them to utilize it as well. For example, for pieces that could be multi-jurisdictional on the riverfront is really kind of the biggest thing, because there's obviously a ton of investment happening on both sides of the river on the riverfront. So it's exciting. On the social piece, we touch on these quite a bit, obviously, because they can have an impact on workforce and talent. So RFRA, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, that's coming up in the Senate. It's really going to depend on the House Judiciary Committee. If they do send it over, that's where it would go to. And Representative Holt, what his thoughts are on moving that forward. So that's where a lot of the focus is on that bill. There was also a bill regarding transgender athletes that came up in the Senate, and they actually did, instead of just doing K-12, they included regents and community colleges and post-secondary as well. That obviously has implications not only for our K-12 schools, but also for Iowa Western, who has a very vibrant athletics department. So I've been in communication with folks at both, and there's obviously concerns about potential impacts, say, for the junior college wrestling championships. So we're continuing to watch that very closely and having negotiations and conversations as to what needs to be done to make sure that that doesn't have any unintended consequences for people on the other side. It's a fairness issue, but we just want to make sure that there's no unintended consequences and unintended implications as a result, because obviously us hosting the National Junior College Wrestling Championship is a very big deal, as is Des Moines and others who are hosting NCAA and other events. So that's something we'll continue to watch. Just as a reminder, we do have a legislative roundtable next week. We are going to do that in person and have it virtually as well for those who prefer that option. But we are having a roundtable from 12 to 1:30 p.m. Next Friday, and we'll look forward to having conversations about some of those bills that did make it through funnel and where that focus is really getting drilled into now on both in both chambers and on both sides of the aisle. So we look forward to that conversation. And we also, in closing, I wanted to just thank everyone that had something to do with our legislative reception and also our Leadership CB Day in Des Moines and for local government and others. That's something that is hugely impactful, not only for the Leadership Council Bluffs classes, but it's also hugely impactful just for our community as a whole to really showcase the great things we have going on in Des Moines. And we had a really good turnout locally and stateside. So I just thank everyone who made that possible, especially our presenting sponsor, Google. They were really a driving force to really make sure that that event could happen in the way that it needed to. So we thank them, as well as our other sponsors who supported us at that legislative reception. With that, I will close this week's weekly legislative update. I thank you for your continued support of the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce, specifically our public policy program, and I hope that you have a very nice rest of the day.